I'm davetrippin, and this is the Interstice podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, wherever that may be. If it's Spotify, iTunes, perhaps it's on the channel most popularly. But thank you for showing up. Really appreciate you. Special shout out, of course, always to my patrons. You guys supporting this really means a lot to me. Thank you very much. So, aside from finally having enough acoustic foam to create a sort of impression of a studio here, what else is going on? It was a work in progress last time. Well, one of the big things I've recently started, which interests me, is I've had on my list of books that I should read something about Caesar. I really like biographies. And like all reading that you do, inevitably they are passed on to the mists of time that you forget most of it. But there's always something really poignant and interesting that stands out to you. And a couple of really memorable ones that I've read is I read a biography on Einstein. I read a biography on Nikola Tesla, on Teddy Roosevelt, which I found out once I was done that I was interested in like Teddy, what is it, Theodore Roosevelt, and I got like, no, I think I got Theo, and there was like the other one. But it ended up being so cool that it was kind of this cool surprise. And so always on my list has been the intention to read something about Caesar. And so, I mean, he's a pretty big deal, right? he did a few culturally significant things in his day. And so I've started to read that, and this thing is an absolute tome, and I like that. I have no issue with something being long. The fictional book that I finished previous to that, you'd think it was long, it was like 800, 900 pages. My favorite author, wonderful. This book dwarfs that. It is 1,600 pages, but that's a kick for me. I like that kind of thing, and I say only, but it's just because of the absurdity of the size of it. I'm about 200 pages in, and to begin with, it was so much information, kind of like setting the scene. It was a bit difficult to follow, but now it's kind of calming down where it was setting the stage for Caesar and kind of like what was he coming into, what was creating initial impressions for him. Now it's more of like how he's establishing himself. What was his reputation as a youth? What did he go through? His life. Exactly what I wanted to read, the biography of Caesar. And it's so incredible that, and the reason that I do this, that you learn so much and you learn how narrow your perspective when this is a figure that you've known about your entire life. Everyone has heard of Caesar, and popular culture touches on this all the time. And I'll add a caveat here to say that the second half, as usual, we will get into the questions. I have the laptop is in the shop, but I got my phone here, so we'll get into the Japan-centric questions in the second half. But there's so much I didn't know. Of course, there's so much I didn't know, and why I also read nonfiction is because truth is stranger than fiction in many cases, and right away it is. Like, I have never heard, no one has said to me that something that haunted Caesar through his life was that when he was like an up-and-coming senator, first he got exiled by the guy who was in power. His name was Sulla. I mean, that's shorthand for like the Romans really had a thing about having like Maximus, Tiberius, Anarchus, Marius, Caesar. They had a real thing about these massive names, but you could just chop it down to that. And he ended up being sent to some eastern province. And once he was there was just all these rumors flying around about like his sexual escapades there. And I had no idea that he was like known for this. And it was a non-heterosexual relationship. But the book then goes on to recount that this is actually probably unlikely because he didn't have any, what would you call this? It's not discretion when it came to him being a huge womanizer. And so the author was pointing out that the likelihood when this guy never had discretion in his life for sexual escapades, that he wouldn't have had it in this case, or that he would have it, like that he would have sneakily done this, seems very unlikely. But I didn't know, and it was again where I do often read these people because they seem superhuman. They don't seem to share the same lives, but inevitably something that's amazing and comforting in a weird way is that when you read about them, it so humanizes them, and a lot of that is their weaknesses, because he had the typical, like, no, like everyone loved gossip in Rome, and this was like nothing, definitely no less than sexual gossip is, like, of course, some of the juiciest, and so everyone loved to gossip. And this was a hot topic for the Roman citizenry, and something that could be leveled at him as like a criticism as he was rising up through the political ranks. And he did the classic thing where you're like, for all this guy's abilities, like that I'm discovering, for all his abilities and all his historical fame that he had, the thing that most perpetuates a rumor or a criticism of you is if you directly oppose yourself to it. If you make this hard line where you're like, you give it the time of day, basically, where you show, I think it's okay if things like bother you, but it's better to kind of like shut up and move on. This is always the better look for people, whereas Caesar in this case was not going to go with the better look. He was going to demand that everyone agree and everyone believe that this never happened. He had like all these nicknames. Apparently, there was like the king of all women, but the queen of all men. That's what his like opponents criticized him with. I had no idea. Finding out fascinating things like that, that very humanizing element about him, that he would so kick up such aggression against people having this opinion, where it's like, let it go, man. You have all the power in the world. Not yet at this point. He was growing into it, but compared to many people, all the power in the world, and you're so human to let this get under your skin and make a point of it that you're not going to let go. There was another fascinating, in terms of scale, like something I'd heard before, that was so intriguing, so interesting to me, about Roman life and the sort of excesses and the wildness of it, that I didn't appreciate, and I'm starting to more, is just how alien the culture is as well. Like these, where religion, they were like deeply societally religious, that they had all of these things that they did, but in a way that was kind of like Japan does, where sure, people maybe have this sort of belief in whatever supernatural force, but mostly it's a societal, cultural behavior, and that's what they had. But like, some of these things were on such a scale that it showed you like what their minds were being exposed to. This is kind of cool. Here's a parallel that you could draw, where we talk about it's never been seen before, the kind of like fame that people have now and the sort of access that they have to it, and when it arrives to them, whether early or late in their lives, and what that does to you. And there's this story recounted. This is confirmed because I've now heard several historical sources are like, this actually happens, that when a Roman general would return from their exploits, there was this track that they would take through the city to celebrate their successes, and it had this huge pageantry about it, where you would be on this float, essentially, paraded around through the city following this line. As I say, all your troops are there with you, and on this, there's a better word for it, where you're like carried along by people. I can't remember it now. But well, on this, you're in your greatest finery. You have this, you're adorned in all these like, trappings of your success, and your face may be painted red like Jupiter. Jupiter is like one of their most significant gods, and behind you, you would have a slave whispering you amidst the pomp and circumstance, and how incredibly overwhelming and empowering, intoxicating empowerment that you would feel from this. This person would remind you that you were not a god. And I was like, wow, that's like, must feel like at least like 1 million followers on Instagram. It was like, how intoxicating an experience must that have been, that you had somebody there behind you saying that to you. Now, I wonder, then there's this other thing, you can reflect on your reflection. I wonder if that is to ground you in the circumstance, or I feel as though somebody reminding me that I was immortal might make me even more so feel like I was a god. Like, oh, I need to be reminded that I'm just immortal. Well, then I must be incredibly close to a god at least. So the cart before the horse, so to speak. It's like, what was this really helping along? But that was one element where I was like, that is so alien and so wild in terms of like their exposure to fame after whatever, military successes they've had. Also, you want to talk about a polarity of wealth that people would see. Although, I suppose it exists now, but I have this impression like, oh, this polarity of wealth, it's not the same. But it was something to do with Sulla, I won't make this into like a tedious list of historical events, but the guy who precedes Caesar I think he was the first dictator of Rome, Sulla was, where he'd like stormed Rome with his army when they didn't give him what he wanted. And he exiles Caesar, and Caesar nearly gets caught at one point and pays off these troops because everybody can be bought because life is tough. So turning somebody in could be potentially less valuable to you and your family than it would be to take a bribe. Very, happens now. It happened over 2,000 years ago, of course. And so the amount given to these soldiers that allowed him to live, I think it was something like 12,000 dinars, whatever that is. Except these, in contrast to the amount of time that it would take for one of these soldiers to earn that amount of money, why you would see it was appealing, it was something like 100,000 lifetimes or something like inconceivable, like that huge sum that was what Caesar gave to earn his freedom. And I love it. I love it. I find such peace and hope in books. And I know there's this great expression like life is experienced forwards but can only be understood backwards. And this is like a great curse of our existence. But it's another reason, as I speak to you now, I really like doing these podcasts, because all these things take time to really articulate themselves in my mind, really cement there. And when I get to speak to you about them, I feel them so much more in a different way than when I'm reading it. I love it when I'm reading it, and especially if I find a place of focus. If you read a lot, I really do find you get this sense of degrees of immersion depending on your focus. Like, I really do want to put the phone to the side. Really try and allow yourself to not think for a while about anything else, because you realize, I guess perhaps that's a thing you realize when you read a book, because you need to be so singularly focused on the words in front of you and connecting the meaning that they are creating, that if you are distracted and if your mind is pulled in a number of directions, you really notice it. Whereas if you haven't done something that focuses you or requires you to do so, then you don't know that you are being pulled in so many directions, and it wakes you up to that, like, oh, I need to meditate. I need to clear my head because this is fragmented, torn in a million directions. And I feel like I get greater clarity on that even as I speak to you now, where I'm like, that is another benefit. You should be really cognizant as you're reading, like how immerse yourself deeper. I think there are a number of habits which are actually, like, I would love to see a study of this, because each of these have been studied for their effects, not thinking of the other. And what I mean by that is to say that there are a number of activities that I find that I feel like they must be causing a similar sort of reaction or energistic quality, I don't know, in your brain when you do this thing that would be similar to when you are meditating. I really do think that when you read books, when you get like a lot, they talk about this in a number of books that I've read about, like training and practice, talking about flow, and when you get into flow and what an experience that is. And I bet that whether it's I'm editing a video, whether it's I'm reading a book, whether it's sometimes when I'm filming, that I get into this state of flow that is so calming and necessary. Our ability to look forward sometimes as such a gift as it is. Like, I think I almost beat to death here can be a disservice, can be a detriment to us because we're worried about all this random shit going on in our lives. So I love that. I love it, and I love this. It's been really good. Actually, when I conclude this, I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to read more of this. I really, really, really enjoying that. Who else I've really, really enjoyed recently? I don't know why it came up, although it kind of figures with like some of the stuff that I listen to. Like I'll listen to music when I'm working out at the gym, but I will just as often put on something that's like podcast-ish. And I really loved Christopher Hitchens when he was alive, like one of these great orators of our time, like Stephen Fry, great allies. There's a great debate that they have with the Catholic Church where those two debate against the church. I was thinking when I saw that, I was like, what are you thinking? You better be confident whoever they chose in the church to speak. They didn't stand a chance. It was incredible. But listening to him a whole bunch, really, really enjoying his, I think that some people, obviously, they called him, they're like, oh, he's like a bully. But then I think there was a great expression or like great way that this was put. I was watching this thing on Dan Harmon recently where he was talking about you do not make friends with Nazis. And I was like, it's a good point. It was kind of this, it's symbolic of the reason why I like Hitchens is because he makes this case for an unapologetic defense of reason, where I think that reason needs to have teeth because irrationality most certainly does. And so I love listening to like somebody that articulate and that intelligent with an intention to uproot bullshit. I really, really, really like that. I've always enjoyed listening to great articulate people. In the same token, I mean, you could really enjoy. That's why I like stand-up comedians, because stand-up comedians in their own way are incredible orators. They are articulate, and it's funny because you might more traditionally say you listen to this person and you're like, oh, okay, they're like they're clearly that when you look up the definition of the word. Who could you take for the example? Somebody like Dylan Moran, I believe he's Irish. Guy is crazy articulate, witty, but I still think that people that might not seem to be that way, their wisdom in their comedy makes them articulate. An example of this might be like Bill Burr, where to speak your truth or the truth, let's not say your truth, let's say the truth clearly, is articulate. And so whatever words that you use to arrive at that, if you've done so clearly, means that you have a mastery of the language, which is really impressive and is simply another way of accomplishing the same thing. And you might even argue, because it doesn't have the same sort of, call it elocution, like to make the point that over here you have like this wit and crazy vocabulary, but you've achieved as clear an understanding as this person has, or been able to communicate as clearly and connect with people as clearly with this, what you might say is lesser language, then that's equally, if not more, of an accomplishment, because you've had less at your disposal to be able to say what it is that you want to say. So yeah, really, really loving listening to that. I mean, I've said a million times. I almost like I don't. Sometimes I don't like mentioning certain people or certain ideas when I do these kind of things because I feel like it's. You see this in Reddit comments. It cracks me up where you'll have like a statement made. Uh, you proposed a question, and then the first answer is witty, and then as opposed to the people talking about whatever the original question was, everybody like a flock of pigeons on a piece of bread crowd around that really juicy tidbit that everyone now wants to throw their 2 cents at that is not in any way a part of like the greater conversation. And I do find that if you mention certain people, then where you may have talked about this, then it suddenly becomes everybody overflowing with joy about that one person, which is kind of connected in whatever way you may have like alluded to, but wasn't really the point, and now it's become the point of the discussion. That's me being human and embittered by people not staying focused and purposeful on a discussion, but that's fine. Um, I've gone through a really interesting stage at my work right now where we've done what are called general achievement tests at the school. And that was really cool. I was actually very, very proud of what I accomplished because I have an advanced class. And within that advanced class, there's quite a range of ability. And I mean, they're incredible. I've talked frequently about them already. Like, great kids, great ability. And what was cool for me is that I did manage within all those abilities to make it as challenging as I could for the person who you might say is at the lower end of the class, but did not allow for the person at the top end of the class to exceed 100%, which I think is perfect. That means that you got that guy in there who you've reached, like pushed him as hard as you could, and allowed that person to excel not so far that they become bored with whatever it is that you've challenged them with. So I thought that was cool. And there's only 6 kids in the class. And so I was able to take special care when it all ended and I got their scores back and I'm marking it up to actually write them each personally something about what it is, I thought they'd reached in their abilities so far and kind of a perspective for moving forward. It's an interesting thing because I can't help but be caught up in the idea that it really is like, I'll teach them stuff. Sure, it's cool. Like you'll learn some new vocabulary, how to conjugate words, how to write better if you do want to do something, compose your ideas. They're gonna learn stuff that's useful to them, I know, but I really do feel like the grades aren't arbitrary. They're a great, what do you want to call it? They're a lighthouse. They're something that you point at in the storm to direct where you're going, kind of like how I take the JLPT. It directs my efforts. But ultimately, how significant is this? Not that very. It's as things develop through their educational career that really it comes to a head when you're those grades that you're getting at whatever it is. I guess it would be 6th grade for them that would then take you into university. Those grades really, really matter if your goal is to attend a university. So what I am more focused on here, although I don't want to take away the significance of the grades, is more like kind of the direction that they're aiming at, because it's relative. I really do think that it's relative. If you got a 99%, if you got a 50% on this test, what matters more is your trajectory, because it's your trajectory that's going to take you somewhere that even if you're down here now, if your trajectory is like this, then you'll reach whatever it is that you want to do. But very, very fulfilling. That was interesting and a hell of a lot of work. I've never created something that you would call it like a term test if you were at university or college or something. It's 50 minutes. So like more significant tests in your life, of course, are going to be longer than that. Like the JLPT is 3 hours, ends up being like 4, 5 because you have these breaks after each hour. Maybe 4. That's what it ends up being. Maybe longer, actually. I can't remember. I'm out of practice since I didn't do the one in July. That got canceled. I will be signing up in August for the one in December, and my march to fluency will continue. So that was really, really cool on the work front recently. Something that was new to me, that was an adventure. It's increasingly important to me, the new experience. I really thrive on new experiences. You're pulled in two directions, of course, because there's something in the status quo isn't what I want to call it. There's something in familiarity, there's something in routine that allows us to thrive as well, because I'm going to the gym, I need a routine. If I'm eating well, I need a routine. But that spark, that thing that reminds us of potential, like that life is not written to the end for us already, is immersing yourself in different experiences. So that was one in the workplace that I did enjoy. And I've continued to enjoy the perspectives of the people at my workplace as well, getting to know them better. I think they're really good people. I think most people are. Some people are warp speed assholes, but I've been privileged to know some really, really wonderful people in my life. Now, what else has continued to unfold for me is a plan for the channel, really, where it's not like one of these talking for the future, but maybe it's some wisdom I could impart on anyone that probably has heard before, but you could use the reminder again. I got sick. That really derailed me. I had all this work, a lot of this to do with the general achievement test, where I intend to make 3 videos a week. I could not do that. But something that immediately starts your engine again. And this has nothing to do with like feeling depressed or anything that's negative. It's more that there's no gas in the tanks. You don't have direction. It's to write things down. When I write out a schedule, that helps me a huge amount. And so that's what I've done. I've written out another 3-week schedule. And woohoo, we got lots of content coming on. I've got lots of, for the time that it's rainy season, I've been so busy, I haven't been able to go out and do more elaborate videos, but even that I have planned for now. The adventure continues. Now, let's head into the second half of the podcast and get a little more Japan-centric, because we're going to be looking at the questions that have been written to me most recently in my Gmail. And of course, I'll say here, if you want to get those questions answered on the podcast, write to me at davetrippin@gmail.com. It's funny. Okay, first to get on the podcast here this time, I'll say beforehand, also I really, really enjoy it whenever you guys write where you're writing from. That's really, really cool. It interests me. That's the whole international scale of the channel is something that I really, really enjoy. Hey Dave, it's Mark, longtime subscriber. Looks like I'll be moving to Japan to teach English next year. Bravo, enjoy the adventure. I'm wondering if you could highlight some useful apps, website, podcasts for foreigners living in Japan. Things on social media, online payment, news, streaming, dating, blogs. I'm sure that Facebook, YouTube, and Tinder are common, unlike in China where I've been teaching for the last 7 years, but I would like to know what the local equivalents are. I also know that Japan is cash-based, but how common are e-payment apps like WeChat Pay, Apple Pay, UK? I would say this, that probably one of the most convenient things that you can do is have a Suica, and Suicas get used everywhere. Like when I say that, a lot of convenience stores, a lot of grocery stores, you can pay with the Suica. So you get them. They're basically like the JR Rail Pass that you get, and it's one of these, not an IC card, it's a magnetic strip or whatever. But you can load it up with cash. You can use it in most places. Perhaps it is an IC card. But that's the most popular. That's what I would say is you want to get your Suica card, you go to any JR station, and any station of any semi-significant size is going to have one of those there. And they're not expensive. It's like $5, $10 to grab one of those. So yeah, pretty good. In terms of like what are useful websites, I found this just because I was considering at one point going to Tokyo, and I was like looking around at places to live there, and the website that will come up again and again, so it's needless for me to prescribe it, but you'd find it useful, is called Tokyo Cheapo, and they have tons of interesting articles on there, and it could be just that you want to know neighborhoods better. It could be that you want to know stuff about housing. Like there's tons and tons of useful stuff there. A big thing, somebody pointed this out in the comments section recently, that was a great point where they're like, nobody talks about this. And that is that if you are looking to furnish a house, for example, when you've just arrived here, that there is a great transient population of foreigners in Japan. They're moving in, they're moving out all the time. And there's this Facebook group called Tokyo Sayonara Sales. And you can go there and find, if not for free, mad cheap furnishing for your home. It's really, really, really useful. And if you want to sell things there, equally as much, you're going to have a really good opportunity. When I sold to save up for the new Sony a6500 that I've used for the last several years, I sold my Canon Mark 7 X2 on there, like within 2 days, 3 days, people were interested to pick it up. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. I think those are rock solid. I think I've done well here. All right. Okay, it's Brian again. Hey, why the hell not? From San Antonio, Texas. Do schools in Japan, Interact Altia, care about your degrees accreditation? I go to a school called the University of the People. Sounds a bit culty. It's an online school that has the Distance Education Accreditation Commission. They recently applied to be regionally accredited. With this, I have no guarantees. Basically, I would go ahead and do it, and remember, it's a human system, and what seems exacting sometimes is not so much so. That if you put it forward your application, they're like, okay, you could find yourself getting through, and perhaps somebody else would in the same situation. You never know. For example, I went to renew my work visa recently. I work, obviously, at a new private school. And when I went in, they asked me nani nani shomeisho, which was this piece of paperwork that says you have officially finished at your previous employer, and it's to make sure you're not like double dipping or whatever. And I was like, no, I don't got that. And they were like, okay. And they just let it go, where I think normally they're quite strict about it. In fact, I know there was another guy there with me who's from my BOE. He's also switching jobs, and they told him he needed that, and they didn't let him through. I don't know. So yeah, I think just go ahead with it. See what you can do. Don't worry too much. Try again. Okay, let's move along. Hey Dave, hope you're well and safe. Thanks. This is Jake, reading in the UK. Sweet. A couple questions, if that's okay. Of course. First one is IT related. Could I find IT related work in Japan? I just passed a level 2 IT diploma course and I'm looking to build on it. Secondly, you have motivated me to start running and eating better. Yes, good man. But I still have trouble with unhealthy snacking. What's your advice to stop snaking? I bet that's snacking. Or to snack better? Okay, sure. I can offer insights. In fact, I want to. I like talking about this health stuff. So the IT thing, absolutely you could. Now, IT diploma, yeah, you want to get on like glassdoor.com. There's a couple of different sites, some that I didn't even know about. I learned about one more recently. I can't remember its name, from a gentleman in Osaka. But yeah, look around and perhaps you could get sponsored and come on over with that. Now, the question of how to snack better, I think the illusion is, like, why we do really shitty snacks is there's this idea that good snacks don't taste good, but it's not true at all. Like, one of the again, everything with tempered consumption, because you need to run a minor caloric deficit if you want to lose some weight, is nuts are fantastic. They're incredibly satiating, good protein, healthy fats, and they're great. They're on the go. They're prepped. Like, you don't need to do anything. So I think that's an easy one to suggest to people. Like, that's something that I've done recently a lot of when I'm on the go, is nuts. I just get some almonds. I'll get some cashews. Cashews are great. You got some extras. You throw those into a stir fry. It's amazing. Anyways, go with the nuts. That's my suggestion. Another thing that you can do is, I think that people are also often trying to go 0 or 100 or nothing. And this is another way in which we defeat ourselves, is to not incrementally make changes, but try and do it all at once. It's the cold turkey thing. And for some people that works. But it's better, in my opinion, to make incremental changes. If you're trying to be healthier, start incrementally and journal. I'm not saying calorie count, but I'm saying you can create habits more effectively, snacking habits as well, if you journal or create goals. So if you say, I'm going to get healthier this week, get a journal specifically to write in it, on Tuesday and Thursday, I write walk. And then on, you want to snack healthy 3 times a week. Start with that, for example. But you're going to, where usually people would only want to have less, maybe 1 cheat day. You allow yourself 2 cheat days, and then for snacking, but the other 3 days, you say to yourself, this will be like, these 3 days are healthy snacks. So that way, introducing incremental changes, you don't even realize that you've, over a short period of time, become a totally different person. Another thing too is, I think people are afraid of, there's this idea like, no sugar, but the sugar of fruits is not digested in the same way as high fructose corn syrup, which is often, this kind of like evil sugar that people are constantly consuming. So as well, while not binging on any of these things, like nuts, super fatty. I say healthy fats, but they're fatty. So if you eat a ton of nuts, you're going to be a fatty. Way healthier sugars, digested in a different way, calorically nutritional for all their vitamins and minerals and fruits. But if you eat 20 bananas in a day, that's still, whether it's healthy sugar or bad sugar, that's a lot of sugar. So don't ever lose sight of that. There is an element of will that comes into it, but I think that will can be helped along by recognizing that sugar is not the devil. It's more like the types of sugar. Change does not need to occur all at once. It occurs more usually incrementally, and that's the way that it's successful. So those are my thoughts for you. Right on, the UK, that's cool. Okay, so let's continue along. No, not that. My job. This is called My Job. Hope you're doing well. Listen to the podcast. On the train. Nice. I love being on the train, relaxing, watching the scenery go by. I live in Osaka. That's cool. With your wife. Wonderful. I've been back and forth to Hawaii. This is all lovely. Sounds like you have a good life. Okay. Now this becomes interesting. So I landed a job at a school, creating curriculum, teaching, so on and so forth, English programming. The benefits are good, the pay is okay, and my bosses are quite kind and give feedback often. There's only one issue. The other foreigners that I work with are extremely negative about everything. They're constantly talking about how stupid Japan's government is, how our pay sucks, how cringe being an English teacher is. Oh, the irony of that, well, they still do it. How they hate living in Japan, and everything in between. I consider myself a generally positive person, but I can't say I don't have bad days. But their constant negativity has started to wear on me, as it would, I think, anyone. I realize Japan isn't perfect and neither is my job, but until I build my skills and find another opportunity, I want to make the best of my current situation. What's your advice for dealing with negative people and not absorbing their energy? So you're in a rough situation there, because the thing that I say, what you have to do, and this is the truth of bad jobs, this is the truth of shitty relationships, you end them. you end them and you move on. Now, I understand that there are situations where people don't have that immediate luxury. Like, what is the expression that people use? They say that rich people can afford integrity, right? Because those of us who may not have that similar financial situation, or they can afford morals or values, because they can change their lives on the turn of a, flip of a dime, or whatever that expression is, and they can afford it, where not all of us can do that. And so you may be locked into this situation here where you have to endure and deal with this. So I think the obvious one there is that as much as you can minimize, you would simply have as little to do with them as possible. Unhealthy people like that, it's not even unhealthy people, it's cynical people, it's shitty people. It's people in that situation are not taking accountability for their lives. And instead of taking accountability for what sucks in their lives and doing something about it, all they do is spew their bullshit outwards to everyone else and create this horrendous butterfly effect of shittiness around them. And I've never had an issue if somebody has an issue with their life or their job or whatever, so provided that they do something about it. As soon as you don't do something about it, you have forfeited your right to complain, bitch, and moan with any sort of gravitas, like with any sort of meaning. You can't take anyone seriously like that who complains about their job if they've done nothing. Why would you? Because they don't even have the fortitude to do that. So why would you respect them? Now, I think the not so easy answer, but when you have to be around them at your work, I think a good way to go through life is you do not try and change others. You change yourself. And in this case, sure, it's not convenient to you, but I would say, sure, the job is good, but I think potential can really light a fire for us, knowing that as soon as you see a light, that light gives us a direction. And it also, it legitimizes our the things that we're struggling with, because we say we're struggling, but I can aim at that and it will, I'm at a loss for the exact word, like I said, legitimize, I guess that's kind of it. It'll give you a way to endure that because you can see the way out of it. And that can then be that your way of being not so worn down by them at work is that you can see a way out. Where I think probably compounding the negativity of them being around you is that you don't see yourself being outside of this situation anytime soon. So all you can think of is, man, I don't see myself switching jobs, so I'm going to have to go in and listen to this like whiny bullshit for however much longer. Whereas if you now immediately started looking around, look at jobs, just to look. Of course, if you found something, it's great, and you pounce on that, and you go to interviews. But because you knew in your mind, I'm getting out of here, I'm climbing out of the pit, I don't have to listen to these people ad infinitum, I think that could bring you a lot of peace. I think that it can, because I know that it has for me. When I've had difficult situations like that, the most important thing for me to do is to create a light that I can see now the darkness receded around me. And that will make it not sting so much, because it actually, if you then get a way out, you start to revel in what used to cause you pain, where you're like, oh, it now feels good to listen to you bitch because I know that there is an expiration date on it, that I'm not going to have to, and then you will be alone with your own pathetic self. And believe me, these kind of people thrive, I would say, they need people, perhaps more than you do, because that's all they have left. It's that they want to be heard. They want to be heard. And if they've got nobody to listen to them complain anymore, then it only deepens their suffering. So you can take a sort of like bitter, dark satisfaction from that as well. You'll be increasing their suffering in a very real way. All right. There's a few thoughts for you. I really do feel that, though. To feel trapped when it's your job or a relationship, I mean, that's something I feel really, really deeply. I have in my life experienced this, and I know how much it can feel like the water's moving up to here when you don't have a way out. But it then makes me, as I say, very confident to say what I have, because I know that it works. I know that if you create a purpose for yourself, and in this case I would say the purpose being like, I can get out of here, then you feel better. Okay. Whoa, jump down. All right. Here we go. All right, on to the next one. How are we doing? I gotta watch the time and everything so we don't suddenly chop off. All right. Doesn't look too long. Interesting name. We'll just call this M. I happen to see your video. I am not a native English speaker, but I've been teaching English for 12 years now here in Greece. TESOL, Advanced Diploma TESOL, Master Degree in Arts, Applied Yeah, nice, okay. I don't have a bachelor's degree. I did my diploma and then worked in a private language. This old chestnut. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure finding a job in Japan would be easy for me. There's no problem with that in the country in Europe and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can totally do it with your specifications. If you were to work in some kind of international school, you could get in there. There's, what is it called? It's called an international humanities and specialist visa that puts you into this, like, it's funny because you're considered an international service in quotes, but you are an educator. But then people strictly under like the Education Act in Japan fall under the instructor visa. So I don't think you would ever get the instructor visa. I think what you would be going for is the humanities and specialist visa, specialist engineer or something. It's crazy. It's crazy that the private schools get given this, and it sounds so much more badass than the instructor visa, which I have. And also another perk to that one, you often default get it for 3 years, whereas the instructor visa, unless you provide a wealth of tax information, is usually just 1. Okay. All right, who do we got here? Been watching your work for quite some time. I just want to tell you, enjoying it. Right on, that's great. The videos are always enjoyable, and then you drop a real doozy. Right on. Okay. I'm in my late 40s, own a couple of small businesses in Niigata. That's awesome. Have some stories to tell. Touch base and say hi. Oh, hilarious. Okay. How you doing, Jeff? I'll probably write back to you on a more personal level, because I sometimes get these. They're just people saying, hey, I like what you do. And so I like to say hello to people. And that's awesome. I like that. We're here to create connections, are we not? All right. Hey, Dave. This is from Haris. We've got a sweet name. I just want to let you know, been listening a lot. That's awesome. Okay. So let's get to the question. I always wanted to travel to Japan and possibly even live there. I find myself in a stable situation here in Atlanta. That's cool. IT work, nice. And I like to experience things vicariously through J-vloggers. Right on. There's some good ones out there. I know you mentioned that you were thinking of getting into IT. How's that going for you? Would love to hear more in your next podcast. I imagine it's tough juggling videos in a new job and learning Japanese and attempting to acquire this new skill set. Yes, you kind of summed it up there. I always love adding to my skill sets. And I think I would, as long as I could, eternally be learning. I've got installed on my computer, DaVinci Resolve, to be able to get into greater color grading for my videos. It's a question currently, I guess it's a personal question for me currently regarding time. Like I talked about in the video previous to this one, the amount of time that this new job takes is incredible. Not only that, I think I could say in large part that's because of the learning curve, where as you grew in capability that you'd not worry so much about how you allocated your time. You'd be able to do it efficiently and get things done quickly. But I'm not at that stage yet. And all things in perfect time, I would say, where the next step, because the registration for it is in August, is to start at this table studying more Japanese. That's going to be a big thing. I'm going to start that up again. But then, yes, of course, these other things I'm so interested in and I was enjoying so much before I moved to this new position. So thanks for the email. Yeah, no, it's in there. Okay, here we go. This is from Sam. Okay, cool. High school teacher in Australia. Awesome. From Australia. That's great. Yeah, not alone. Blind in your experience with the amount of information you have to process. Yeah. My question. Okay. How does the Japanese schooling system differ from Canada, your own experience, and do you think one could learn from the other? And why is your name Dave, yet the podcast author name is Charles? Okay. So, how do I think that it differs? Of course, the perspective has to come from my student perspective in Canada versus the education instructor perspective that I have here in Japan. I would say there's much more. It's so imprinted by the culture, right? Where there's such things are carried out with such uniformity here. Like, for example, it's like the way that Japanese language is used to ritualize certain behaviors is something that imprints itself across their education system here. And a great example I'd like to highlight this is the way in which things are carried out in unison for lunch at the schools. So before you start, the students always repeat these same phrases again and again. And it's like, mask o hazushimashou, which means like everyone remove your mask. And then before you eat, you would say itadakimasu, which means I'm about to receive something, which is interesting given that it sounds like a religious prayer, but it's not. It's secular. But it's song as old as time, but it's totally there for a reason. The collectivism cannot be understated in the school system. The way in which they are so collectivist stands out to me, and you see it in so many different ways as you go through the Japanese school system. And that language breeds a kind of mindset in the students where I totally see people who are English speakers for that more individual culture. There's a presence of personality that it fills a room as an English speaker. It just doesn't happen as much with Japanese. Not saying that there aren't big personalities and bold kids and all this stuff, but as a whole experience, far more so in the English setting do you have like this incredibly expressive individuals, and way more in the Japanese school system is it a feeling like the rest of their culture is of collectivism, of group. There's so many activities that seem to be done almost just for the sake of doing it in a group, whereas you do not see that, or I never experienced it when I was a student back in Canada. I could go on, but as we are reaching the end of the podcast, I can't dwell here for much more. And we'll just finish with the question that you had there about my name. I could make it an entire video dedicated to those differences, but great question anyway, Sam. Thank you very much. The reason that it's Charles is the publisher of the podcast. My name is Charles David Jameson. Going for a bit of the Roman thing there, I guess, with the elongated name. Because it's a tradition in my family that the first name that you were given is in remembrance of a past generation. And so I believe that Charles was the name of my great-grandfather. So that's why I took that. I have that name, but I go by Dave. And then, sometimes on official documents or something like that, of course, I'll write Charles. So people are like, oh, yeah, it matches up with your ID or whatever that I have. And that is why. As a closing thought, that was something that struck me so interesting recently, what a brainwashing we've done to think so little back into our past and our relationships that we have with our ancestors now, where your parents, maybe your grandparents and your grandparents, yeah, more or less, some people with stronger, some people with weaker relationships to them. But isn't it weird that we don't know anything beyond that, but it is so incredibly important to how we arrived here, and yet we don't even go 2 generations back? This is a whole conversation I wanted to have on the podcast, but I realize it now with such short time left, I can't go into it. Perhaps we bring that up on the next one. But I hope you've enjoyed this. It was good. Like I said, this is it's kind of therapy for me to speak to you, and I hope wherever you are, on a commute, on a train, perhaps you're cleaning your house, maybe you actually sat and watched this video, you brave soul you. I appreciate you very much for all of it. Thank you. And please do consider subscribing, hitting a like on this video. That's how I can grow and hopefully share more and meet more of you. Share more of what I create, meet more of you. Share more of you like a slave trader in Roman times. And if you haven't, please do consider supporting me on Patreon. It means the world to me. I really, really appreciate it. We got a lot of cool stuff over there in a great community. And for now, the clock has run out.